Okay. I think this will be a short one. Very full day. Coming back from out of town. Very packed. And, we're going to get a lot of my reflection. Didn't come with contacts prepared. And I'm learning that I do not know as much about backing up my device to make sure that I have adequate room in terms of memory and storage. I have just under 18 minutes of recording space left, and I'm using it right now to explain that I have less than 18 minutes of time. That's fine. So that's something I gotta work on. I was reflecting a little bit today, and then a little bit other days, on the ethics, how do I say that? Ethics of interpersonal preparedness for therapy. That sounds right enough. What I mean by that is therapists need to be in the right headspace to do their job, differently than other fields and professions. Everyone performs better when they're in the right headspace for the work that they're doing. It's just, in general, people will tell you that, usually. I'd rather be in the right headspace for this task, to do this thing. People drive better when they're well rested. People are more organized and structured when they've eaten, had enough water, stuff like that. But something interesting about the ethics of therapy, one of the things that I talk to a lot of people about with therapy is that the tools that we use are in our mind, in our head. We take them everywhere. There are some ways to talk around that. Play therapists like myself will have toys and play items, or sand tray therapy items. For sand tray, EMDR people have tappers sometimes, and you can get into items that are helpful, but you don't need anything. Goodness. I can go anywhere and do this job. Any moment, any place, anytime. So that makes it interesting for what it looks like to show up. In the same way, if I was a chef, personal chef, somebody hired me and I had a very dull set of knives, and I couldn't really cut things, and it was all like scratchy and not clean cut, and things weren't good. It wouldn't work very well. And you might say, like, hey, you didn't do a good job today. You normally are better. If it's so bad, someone might be like, hey, this didn't feel really worth my money this week for that meal you prepared. That's not a very relatable thing, I guess. I, among most people, do not have a personal chef. If you think about your own kitchen, like preparing stuff, you go to a restaurant, that's probably better. So therapy, I think we owe clients, patients, adequate mental acuity to perform well with our tools in our head. So I could probably do a couple weeks on this topic and the ins and outs of different pieces of it, but we'll see if I do. When you think about, someone starts their day, maybe they have 6 appointments in the day. Therapist starts their day, rather. 6 appointments, the first 3, they're feeling great, they got good sleep. Had breakfast, been drinking water, exercised that morning, feel great. They're doing well. They have an hour off. They get a phone call, someone they care about passed away, and they decide to go ahead and finish out the day. But they're super distracted. Can't even pay attention. Can't pay attention. Their mind's on that person. They're doing everything they can to just kind of nod their head and be like, to the person. Ask random questions. Tell me more. What does that mean? All fair questions. Fair responses to people being like, yeah, you're not doing anything wrong, but maybe those aren't the responses that they would have given had they not received that news during their off hour. You could argue that the 3 people that were seen prior to that news being received better care and got a better version of that tool. And again, this is true in multiple fields. The knife example I gave a moment ago is true for musicians. Like, singers cancel shows when their voices are out, and some people get upset. They're like, just sing with a bad voice, whatever, do your best. And other people are like, I get it, that sucks. I think a lot of people wouldn't want their therapist coming in spacey and out of it and stressed. But where's the line? I mean, I've told clients I'm having a stressful day or I'm a little bit more distracted today, but I've felt like I can be present with them. And if I didn't, I feel like I would have an ethical responsibility to cancel. And so that's kind of the question, is where's that line out for people? And I think it's different for everyone. And I do think it's very therapist dependent. Now, different appointments call for different things. So someone might just be naturally more engaged with a certain appointment, regardless of how they're doing. How they're doing matters, but they're easily engaged with that case. Or someone else, or another case, person's like, I feel like we're doing good work, but it is hard for me to do that. A lot of people might feel that way with like difficult couples work. They're like, this feels very satisfying and I enjoy it a lot, but it's hard. It takes a lot out of me. This also gets into the question of, if you're a therapist and you're working with a couple that's maybe getting a divorce, and you come into work just having learned that your partner wants to talk about a divorce, and you are blindsided by it. You're like, oh. You might not be fit to work with that case right now. You might have to drop it completely. You might not even be that day. It might just be, you're done for now because you got to deal with your own stuff. Like, how we show up makes a big difference, and you don't have to show up perfect either. This is I think, interesting. And I know lots of people would just flat say, this is the ethics of that. Or they'd say, like, it doesn't matter, you can do your job. Or, absolutely you have to quit. So many people in my field are very quick to say, absolutely yes, absolutely no, 100% this, totally that. It's not that simple most of the time. However, if anyone's going to overcomplicate something, it's me. But I think it's not that simple. A lot of this field, people do put arbitrary rules up, and they say, hey, I'm not going to work if this type of stuff happens, or if I don't feel fully resolved on this issue in my own life, I'm not taking on cases like that. And I get that. I do think a more useful tool is, how do you disengage from your own pain enough to navigate a case? More like compartmentalizing than anything else. Because I might say, hey, I don't work with grief. I'm not good at it. And then a client comes in, their pet passed away, and they're grieving. Well, I don't work with grief. Now, I myself do. But this therapist in this example doesn't. Do they say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't talk about that. I'm not a grief therapist. I don't think that's out of any therapist's scope of practice to sit with grief, but I do think it's out of a lot of therapists' scope of practice to treat it well. Do they need intensive grief work? Do they need to see a grief therapist while they're seeing you for the non-grief? Lots of opinions about doing 2 therapies at the same time. It is okay, but you gotta be clear on who's doing what, and they're gonna overlap eventually a little bit. So it's hard to be completely separate. But that's the thing, because sometimes someone's grieving. They don't need a grief specialist. They need someone who they already know who cares about them to say, I still care about you, and I'm here, and I'm going to sit with you with whatever you need right now. Friends and family can do that. It doesn't mean they're doing grief therapy, but it might be therapeutically beneficial for their grief. So, where do we draw these lines of like, oh, I'm not in a position to do that? I'm going off a little bit though. I'm mostly questioning and thinking about how we show up under mental or emotional unavailability and whether or not we claim to still be available. Yeah. I'm so tired I can barely keep my eyes open. Just like working with construction equipment, you're not supposed to do that groggy. You can probably do it emotionally upset though. Or stressed. Some stuff's just subjective, black and white. I'm moving object A over to location B. Therapy, not as much. Any relationally driven task, though, it's gonna be that way. In some areas in life, request that. It's like working as a waiter or waitress. A lot of people will say they feel like they have to fake a smile. Nail technicians, people working at salons, like that, like I'm not feeling it, but my job is just this, and I have to put on a face and pretend. They can relate a little bit. But the thing with therapy is the entirety of the tool is how you come present to the space. So I think that's the hard part to consider, is where is each individual's line? And I don't know if someone should think through where that line is. I couldn't tell you for sure where mine is, other than I'm not here now. I've gotten close once, and it was actually feeling physically sick more than emotionally not there. I was in an appointment one time, and I actually started the appointment feeling fine, but over the course of that, I think that one was 50 minutes, I think. Massive headache, and my stomach hurt so bad. Before it didn't, and then during, just it grew. And I debated ending it early. It was I ended up getting knocked on my butt for a day, getting sick, which is not common for me. So that's the closest I've gotten, and it had nothing to do with like mentally there. It was physiological pain, which absolutely can get in the way of like focusing. And I did. If that would have been like an hour and a half session, it probably would have ended early. Probably would have had to call it, because I wouldn't be able to focus. My body hurt so bad. Yeah, so it's an interesting line to me. But I do think you could argue, if I show up to work tired, I'm like tired. Sometimes I tell people I'm tired, and it's true, but I'm not like falling asleep and lacking focus. But there are days where I'm like, I know I could be 10, 20, 30% more attentive and focused, but I don't doubt my ability to do my job right now. So where do we draw the line? And I don't know anyone who overdoes it. If anything, I exclusively know people who underdo it, who like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be here today. And that's not even common. I rarely run into people, but even in that rare sample, that extreme rarity, the other extreme rarity is rare within that metric. Even I never see people cancel for not feeling present. And I should say, in an outlier situation, I know people who've canceled because of grief, like I said before, or intense life circumstances or things like that where it makes no sense for them to be there. I've seen that, but I'm talking more like someone just didn't sleep the night before and they're not capable and present, or they're just reeling from something that happened. And it's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't. It's actually not true. I have had at least one or two people that I've told, like, just cancel your day and take care of yourself. So that actually wasn't true after I thought about it more. Yeah. But even that's not my assessment. That's just a recommendation. I think you should cancel. With some exception to working with like students or people that you're supervising. You say, hey, this isn't good. Don't do this. Anyway. So point being, it's an interestingly delicate process of how acute am I today? How focused am I? It said a minute ago, I've had days 10, 20%, 30%. I could have had that much more being on it mode. And someone could say, well, man, if that happens even once a month for a couple of years, you've really dropped the ball. Maybe. But also, the way we interact with clients, someone might get a ton better result because you mix well. I have the potential to really draw this out a lot through here, and I'm not, because I have about 60 seconds left on this recording. I'll think about this more. There's an interesting ethical line for when we say we're not in the headspace to do a job. And this is true for life. Like, telling someone I can't come to the party tonight, I shouldn't even be driving. I'm distraught. It's like, okay. So it has an effect in life, but I think this job, like, that's a requirement. I don't sit there every day and think about, am I in it today? But we have a line that we have to be reflective on. It's probably a lower threshold than other fields. And other fields have thresholds they have to consider that I don't. So it is, each are unique. So yeah, I'll leave it there. That's worth reflecting on more for me. It's probably not done. But yeah, that'll be that for today. Happy Monday, everyone.